My parents signed my inheritance to my sister. They missed one clause written by Grandpa. Before you find out what happens next, hit the subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We want to see just how far this life-changing story can reach. The smell of lilies always makes me sick now. It reminds me of the funeral home, the hushed whispers, and the fake tears my parents shed for a man they hardly visited. Grandpa Arthur was my hero, my mentor, and the only person in my family who actually saw me. While my parents, Mark and Linda, were busy chasing social status, and my younger sister, Chloe, was busy spending their money on clothes she wore once, I was with Grandpa. I spent every weekend at his sprawling ranch, fixing fences, feeding the horses, and listening to his stories about how he built his company from nothing. At the funeral, I stood in the back, wearing a suit I had bought for prom 5 years ago. It was a bit tight in the shoulders, but I didn't care. My parents were in the front row, wearing designer black outfits that probably cost more than my car. Chloe was next to them, scrolling on her phone, looking bored. She didn't cry once. Not when he died, and not now. To them, Grandpa Arthur wasn't a person. He was a bank account that had finally opened up. I wiped a tear from my eye, feeling utterly alone in a room full of people. I knew they were just waiting for the reading of the will, like vultures circling a fresh kill. The drive back to Grandpa's ranch was quiet. I drove my beat-up truck, while my parents and Chloe took the family SUV. They had insisted on holding the wake at the ranch, claiming it was what Arthur would have wanted. I knew the truth, though. They wanted to start measuring the drapes. They wanted to stake their claim before the body was even cold. When I pulled into the long gravel driveway, my stomach turned. The ranch was my sanctuary, the place where I felt safe. Now, it felt like a battlefield. I parked around the back, near the barn where Grandpa and I used to sit and drink iced tea. I could hear my mother's voice carrying from the front porch. "We'll knock down this wall," she was saying, her voice high and excited. "Open up the living room. And that old barn has to go. It's an eyesore." My heart hammered against my ribs. That barn wasn't an eyesore, it was history. It was where Grandpa taught me how to use a hammer, how to ride a horse, and how to be a man. They hadn't even been inside the house for 10 minutes, and they were already erasing him. I took a deep breath and walked toward the house, ready to fight for his memory. Inside, the house was filled with neighbors and distant relatives eating finger sandwiches. I tried to make my way to the kitchen to get a glass of water, but my father intercepted me. "Ethan," he said, his voice lacking any real warmth. "Good of you to finally join us. Your sister has been looking for you." I doubted that. Chloe never looked for anyone unless she needed money or a ride. "I was parking the truck, Dad," I said quietly. "Right, that old thing," he sneered. "Don't park it in the front. It ruins the aesthetic." He took a sip of his wine. "Listen, we need to have a family meeting later. In the study. Once everyone leaves." His tone was serious, businesslike. It wasn't the tone of a grieving son. "Okay," I said, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "What about?" He just smiled, a cold, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just some administrative details regarding the estate. We want to get everything settled quickly so we can move forward." Move forward. That was code for spend the money. I nodded and pushed past him, needing to get away from his suffocating cologne. The guests finally left around 6 o'clock. The house grew quiet, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I walked into the study, a room lined with books that Grandpa had actually read. My parents were sitting behind Grandpa's massive oak desk, looking like they were presiding over a trial. Chloe was draped over a leather armchair, filing her nails. I took the stiff wooden chair opposite the desk. It felt like I was being called to the principal's office. "Ethan, sit down," my mother said, clasping her hands on the desk. "We have some news." She looked at my father, who nodded. "As you know," my father began, "Grandpa left a substantial estate. The ranch, the investments, the savings." I nodded. "I know. My father cleared his throat. Well, your mother and I are the executors of the will. That means we decide how things are distributed. That didn't sound right to me. Executors were supposed to follow the will, not decide it. But I stayed silent, waiting for the other shoe to drop. We've decided, my mother interrupted, that it's best to keep the assets consolidated. To keep the wealth in the family. What does that mean? I asked, looking between them. My father pulled a folder from a drawer. It means we are transferring the deed of the ranch and the bulk of the liquid assets to Chloe. I froze. Chloe. I looked at my sister, who smirked without looking up from her nails. Why Chloe? She's never even spent a night here. She hates the country. Chloe has a bright future, my mother said defensively. She needs the security. She's going to fashion school in Paris. She needs the capital to start her brand. And what about me? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. I've worked this land for 10 years. Grandpa said. Grandpa was old, Ethan, my father snapped. He was confused at the end. He didn't know what was best for the family image. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a check. We haven't forgotten you. Here is $10,000. It's enough to get a new apartment, maybe fix that truck of yours. I stared at the check. $10,000. It was a lot of money to some, but compared to the millions the estate was worth, it was an insult. It was a tip you gave to a waiter, not an inheritance for a son. I don't want your money, I said, pushing the check back. I want the ranch. Grandpa promised me the ranch. He told me 1,000 times. Verbal promises don't hold up in court, sweetie, Chloe chimed in, finally looking up. Her eyes were cold, just like our father's. Besides, what would you do with it? You're just a mechanic, Ethan. You can't run an estate. You'd run it into the ground in a year. My mother nodded in agreement. It's for your own good, Ethan. This property is too much responsibility for you. Chloe has the vision to turn it into something profitable. A wedding venue, perhaps. I felt sick. They were stripping away my heritage and handing it to a girl who couldn't tell a cow from a horse. I'm not signing anything, I said, standing up. And I'm not accepting this arrangement. There has to be a reading of the will. A legal reading. My father's face turned red. We are the parents. We decide what is best. We are trying to save you the embarrassment of a public reading where you get nothing. He stood up too, leaning over the desk. If you fight us on this, Ethan, we will drain every penny of this estate in legal fees. You will end up with nothing. Take the 10 grand and walk away. It's not about the money, I shouted, losing my temper for the first time. It's about respect. It's about what Grandpa wanted. He hated how you spoiled her. He hated how you ignored him. Don't you dare speak to us like that, my mother screamed. We are your parents. We gave you life, you gave me life, but you never gave me a family, I shot back. I turned and walked out of the study, slamming the heavy door behind me. I heard my mother shriek, but I didn't stop. I walked straight out to my truck, my hands shaking so hard I could barely find my keys. I drove to a motel in town, not wanting to stay under the same roof as them. My mind was racing. Could they really do this? Could they just decide to override Grandpa's wishes? I knew I needed help. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Mr. Sterling. He was Grandpa's lawyer, an old-school attorney who had been handling the family business for 40 years. I called him, even though it was late. He answered on the second ring. Ethan? Is everything all right? His voice was calm and reassuring. No, Mr. Sterling. It's not. My parents, they're trying to take everything. They said they're giving the ranch to Chloe. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, Mr. Sterling let out a dry chuckle. They said that, did they? Yes. They offered me $10,000 to walk away. Ethan, Mr. Sterling said, his voice sharpening. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. Meet me at my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. Tell your parents to be there too. The official reading is tomorrow, regardless of what they say. The next morning, the sun was shining, but the air felt cold. I arrived at Mr. Sterling's office 10 minutes early. It was a small brick building on Main Street, unassuming but dignified. My parents' SUV pulled up right at 9. They stepped out, looking like they were going to a gala. Chloe was wearing sunglasses, holding a large iced coffee. When they saw me, my father scowled. I told you not to make this difficult, Ethan, he hissed as they approached the door. We offered you a way out. I'm just here to hear what Mr. Sterling has to say, I replied, keeping my face blank. Mr. Sterling works for us now, my mother said haughtily. He'll do what we tell him. We walked into the office. Mr. Sterling was sitting behind his desk, surrounded by stacks of paper. He didn't stand up when we entered. He just gestured to the chairs. Please, sit. Mr. Sterling, my father began, taking charge immediately. We appreciate you seeing us, but as we discussed on the phone, well, I assumed we discussed it. We have come to a family agreement regarding the distribution of assets. He placed a document on the desk. We've decided to bypass the formalities. We will take stewardship of the estate, and title will transfer to our daughter, Chloe. Mr. Sterling looked at the document over his reading glasses. He didn't pick it up. He just looked at it as if it were a piece of trash. I see, he said slowly. And does Ethan agree to this family agreement? My father waved his hand dismissively. Ethan is emotional. He doesn't understand the complexities of estate management. We are acting in his best interest. Mr. Sterling turned his gaze to me. Ethan, I don't agree to anything, I said clearly. I want to hear the will. Very well, Mr. Sterling said. He opened a thick leather binder on his desk. As the executor named in the will. My father interrupted. Excuse me. Linda and I are the executors. Arthur told us. Mr. Sterling shook his head. Arthur may have told you many things to keep the peace, Mark. But in his final will and testament, dated 3 months ago, he named me as the sole executor. My parents' faces went pale. 3 months ago, my mother whispered. He was senile 3 months ago. On the contrary, Mr. Sterling said, his eyes hard. I recorded the signing. He was of sound mind and body. In fact, he was sharper than I've ever seen him. Chloe shifted in her seat, taking off her sunglasses. Does this mean I don't get the house? She asked, sounding more annoyed than worried. Let's read, Mr. Sterling said. To my daughter, Linda, and her husband, Mark, Mr. Sterling read, I leave the sum of $100,000. My parents looked at each other, confused but relieved. 100,000? My father asked. That's, well, it's not the millions, but we can work with the assets. Mr. Sterling held up a hand. I haven't finished. I leave you $100,000 on the condition that you never set foot on the ranch again. The room went silent. What? My mother screeched. That's absurd. It's our family home. It was Arthur's home, Sterling corrected. To my granddaughter, Chloe, he continued. Chloe sat up straighter. I leave my collection of vintage porcelain dolls. Chloe stared at him. Dolls? Are you joking? I want the money. The trust fund. There is no trust fund for you, Chloe, Sterling said calmly. Arthur felt that you had been given enough in life already without earning it. This is an outrage, my father shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. We will contest this. He can't cut us out like this. He can, and he did, Sterling said. But we haven't gotten to the main assets. The ranch, the savings accounts, the stock portfolio. The total value is approximately $15 million. My heart stopped. 15 million? I knew Grandpa was well off, but I didn't know it was that much. To inherit the remainder of the estate, Sterling read, the beneficiary must meet the requirements of Clause 8, Paragraph 4. This clause is what we call a conditional bequest. My parents leaned forward. What's the condition? My mother asked, desperate. Is it about college? Chloe is going to college. No, Sterling said. It is not about college. He turned the page. Clause 8 states, the entirety of my estate shall pass to the family member who can prove, via the logs, that they contributed to the maintenance of the ranch and the care of my person for at least 500 hours in the calendar year preceding my death. My parents froze. Chloe looked confused. The logs? She asked. What are the logs? The red notebook, I whispered. Everyone looked at me. The notebook in the barn, I said, my voice gaining strength. Grandpa made me sign it every time I came over. Every time I fixed a fence, every time I mowed the lawn, every time I drove him to the doctor. He said it was for tax purposes. Mr. Sterling smiled at me. It was a genuine, warm smile. He reached into his drawer and pulled out the battered red notebook I knew so well. Arthur sent this to me the day before he died, Sterling said. He had it notarized. He opened the book. I have tallied the hours. Linda, 12 hours. Mark, 8 hours. Chloe, 0 hours. He looked at my parents. 12 hours in a year. That's 1 hour a month. Probably just long enough to ask for money. My mother flushed a deep crimson. We are busy people. We have jobs. And Ethan? Sterling continued, ignoring her. Ethan logged 940 hours. 900? My father gasped. That's impossible. That's like a part-time job. It was a part-time job, I said. I went there every Friday night and stayed until Sunday evening. I fixed the roof you wouldn't pay for. I mowed the 20 acres you said were too much work. I fed him when he was too sick to cook. So, Sterling concluded, closing the notebook. According to the specific instructions of the clause, Ethan is the sole heir to the ranch and the $15 million estate. My mother let out a strangled sob. No, you can't do this. He's just a boy. He doesn't know how to manage money. I think he knows the value of work, Sterling said. Which is more than I can say for the rest of you. Chloe stood up, her face twisted in ugly rage. This is unfair. Grandpa promised me. He said I was his princess. He loved you, Chloe, I said softly. But he saw who you were becoming. He wanted you to learn to stand on your own feet. I don't want to stand on my own feet, she screamed, stomping her foot like a toddler. I want my inheritance. I already put a down payment on an apartment in Paris. Then I suggest you get a refund, Sterling said. Or get a job. Chloe turned to our parents. Do something. Fix this. My father looked defeated. He knew the law. He knew that if the will was specific and the logs were notarized, he didn't have a leg to stand on. Ethan, he said, his voice changing instantly to a wheedling, pathetic tone. Son, listen. We can work this out. We're family. You don't need all that land. We can manage it for you. I looked at my father. I looked at the man who had offered me $10,000 to disappear just yesterday. I don't need you to manage it, I said. I've been managing it for years. You just didn't notice. But the taxes, my mother cried. The upkeep. It will bankrupt you. Actually, Sterling interrupted. There is a trust set up specifically for taxes and maintenance. Ethan won't have to spend a dime of his own money to keep the ranch running. Arthur thought of everything. He looked at my parents. He also thought about the college fund. My parents went rigid. What college fund? I asked. Grandpa set up a college fund for both of you when you were born, Sterling explained. $50,000 each. He looked at my father. Mark, would you like to explain where Ethan's $50,000 went? My father tugged at his collar. We had to borrow it. For an investment. We intended to pay it back. You spent it on a kitchen renovation, I said, remembering the year they redid the house. You told me there was no money for my college. That's why I went to trade school. That's why I became a mechanic. It was a loan, my mother insisted. It was theft, Sterling corrected. And under the terms of the will, that amount, plus interest, is to be deducted from the $100,000 left to you. So you get nothing, Sterling said, doing the math on a notepad. Actually, after legal fees and the repayment of the stolen trust, you might owe the estate money. My father slumped in his chair. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man who realized he had gambled everything and lost. Ethan, my mother pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time, tears of fear. You wouldn't let them do this to us. We're your parents. We raised you. You housed me, I corrected. Grandpa raised me. I stood up. I want them off the ranch, I told Sterling. Today. You can't kick us out, Chloe yelled. Our stuff is there. We were going to stay for the summer. It's my property, I said calmly. And I don't want strangers living in my house. Strangers? My mother whispered. We are your blood. Yesterday, I said, looking her dead in the eye. You told me I was just a mechanic who would run the place into the ground. You tried to buy me off with a check that wouldn't even cover a new car. You treated me like a stranger then. So I'm treating you like strangers now. I turned to Sterling. What are my options? I can have the sheriff issue a vacate notice, Sterling said. They have 24 hours to remove their personal belongings. My family left the office in shambles. My father was pale and shaking. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably. Chloe was furiously texting, probably trying to cancel her Paris trip. I stayed behind with Mr. Sterling. You did good, kid, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. Arthur would be proud. He knew, didn't he? I asked. He knew they would try to screw me over. He knew exactly who they were, Sterling nodded. That's why he wrote the clause. He wanted to make sure the person who got the land was the person who actually loved it. He told me, if Ethan logs the hours, he earns the empire. If he doesn't, then maybe I was wrong about him. But he knew he wasn't wrong. I drove back to the ranch alone. When I pulled up, my parents' SUV was being loaded. They were throwing suitcases into the trunk, moving frantically. They didn't look at me as I parked. They were too ashamed, or maybe too angry. I walked past them, up the steps of the porch, and into the house. It was quiet. The annoying chatter of the guests was gone. The scheming voices of my parents were outside. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of iced tea. I sat at the table where Grandpa used to sit. I looked out the window at the barn. It didn't look like an eyesore to me. It looked like a castle. The next few months were a whirlwind. I moved into the main house, but I kept my room simple. I hired a few hands to help with the heavy lifting, but I still did the morning feedings myself. I wanted the animals to know me. I wanted the land to know I was there. My parents moved into a small condo in the city. I heard through the grapevine that they had to sell their big house to pay off debts they had been hiding. Chloe didn't go to Paris. She had to get a job as a receptionist at a dental office. She texted me once, asking for money. I didn't reply. I wasn't being cruel. I was just letting them learn the lesson Grandpa tried to teach them. You get what you work for. One evening, I was cleaning out the barn, organizing Grandpa's tools. I found the red notebook on his workbench, where I had put it back. I opened it to the last page. Underneath the tally of hours, there was a small note in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. I hadn't seen it before. It read, "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means you kept showing up. That's the secret to life, son. Just showing up when everyone else has better things to do. The land is yours, but the character you built earning it? That's something they can never take away." I closed the book, smiling. I walked out into the cool evening air, looking over the fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. I wasn't just a mechanic anymore. I was a Sterling. And I was exactly where I belonged.